Hello and welcome to this iMeshh tutorial, and today we have the second Archvis tutorial and I'm super excited to get started. The first one has been so well received and I've seen other people making the same image and I think it's cool. I think the final image is a cool image, but it's very moody and I've definitely strayed away from the mood board at the beginning. The mood board did give me some really cool ideas for the actual scene itself, but I do think that it came out a bit too moody. And in general, if you're going to do an image for a client, then they're going to definitely tell you to make it a bit brighter. So I thought I might do a bit more of a client-friendly render. So it'll be a bit brighter, a bit lighter, and just more friendly in general. So I'm excited to get started. I'll probably break it down into different sections. So probably from like cameras to lighting to composition and color palettes and stuff like this. You have to note that if you are doing Arch-vis, then your job is essentially a cameraman or a camerawoman to fill a scene to make it look nice. So in general, if you're a interior photographer, you'll probably have a set of nice furniture that you can bring to a scene and fill it. And you have then the task to light it correctly and to photograph it correctly. Your job isn't to build the furniture. And the same is here. So, you know, you can get really good at modeling furniture or you can get really good at doing Arch-vis. And to do both takes a very long time. So if you're looking to get into Arch-vis, I'd recommend you find some free model resources or find some places to buy some cheap models. And I mean, I didn't want this to be like 100% an iMeshh promotional video, but we do sell cheap Blender 3D models, of course. That is what we do. That is why we are here. We make some 3D models for Archvis and at a good price. So if you're looking for some, check out iMeshh. If not, there are other resources online to find some other good models for Blender. But at the point at which I'm going to fill the scene with models, I will be using iMeshh models. So you know, I'll tell you why I chose that particular furniture model. And if you have a free resource or if you have other models, you can then look at the criteria which I have for this particular sofa or table, and then you can find one which you think is similar or has a similar kind of feeling to it. Or of course, if you have an iMeshh exclusive, then you can use the ones we're using in this scene. And I think that's that. I will get started. Okay, so the first thing to do is obviously to make the walls, otherwise you don't really have a room. And there are several different methods. One way is to actually use the Archpack wall generator, and then you can add a wall, you can choose the length, you can add another wall, and then you can add length to this and so on. But this is not the method I'm going to use in this tutorial, but if you think that this one is the one that you prefer, then of course you can find a tutorial online for making Archpack walls and floors, because the idea is that once you finish making the wall, you can then add a ceiling and floor, because it also has, for example, a floor generator, and these are all super helpful, but it's just not the method which I will be, not the method I'll be going for. So I'm just going to delete this. There is another method, of course, if you have plans, if you're lucky enough to get some plans, then this one is really helpful. So what you can do is, it also depends on how good the plans are, is that you can go over to here, Shift S, cursor to selected, and then you go to add a mesh and add a single vert. If you turn on snapping to vertex, if you go to vertex, you can press E, and then you can just build the room like this. And you're going to get a really quick room. Of course, these are actually curves, so you can also, let's just whatever, I don't know how the room is actually meant to be. And then you get like this, and E and Z. And like I just said, if this is curves, you can go and do F3, convert to mesh, and then you can also grab all of these and just do the same thing, E and Z. And then it's already to the right, already to the right dimensions for you. But I will just do just show you for this method here. So I've just made this really quick room, and then how to add these windows. So if you're using Archpack, that will actually allow you to very easily cut out the windows using a Boolean method. And there are other different methods as well, such as you go into edit mode, add a loop cut, and then you can find the length you want. Oh, and also if you want to get these measurements up in edit mode, if you go over to here and you can click on edge length, and then you can see how easily it is to do that. So if you just bring this over to the windows, and then you can get this and then extrude these out to here, and then X and then F. And then we have the window there. There is also, as I said, there's a Boolean method, which is also like if I grab these, let's just grab this because these are the correct shapes for the windows, and just do separate these and bring these up to the height of the window. You should be able to see on the plans, it should be written somewhere how high they are. And then you go, oh, let's convert this to a mesh as well. And then we go E, A, F. Oh, sorry. Let's do merge by distance. F, there we go. And then we go E and bring them up to the correct height. And that should be perfectly fine. And then we go to this object here and we do Boolean, and then we select this one here, and hopefully it's right up against the wall. Let's try fast. Okay, and then I think that should have worked. So now if we go into edit mode, we then have these faces here, and we can just delete these. And we go into this object, delete these faces too. You know, you get the idea, and then you have the windows here, and it's already cut out perfectly for you. And then you can, of course, join the mesh as well. Just do Shift N to make sure all the normals are facing the same way, and then merge by distance, and then it will also merge these corners. But if you're working inside a room, you do want the normals to be the other way around, so you just want to do Shift N and do inside. But this is a really quick introduction to this kind of method, but this is not the method I'm going to use in this tutorial. So if you want me to show you a more in-depth example of how this works, maybe with more realistic plans, then do let me know, and I'll try to do a tutorial for that. But what I'm going to be doing for this tutorial is actually just making a cube. Because it's my own room, I want to kind of work with it and see which size I want, and just try to work with the room as it goes. And I don't really have any specific plans, but I probably go about 2.84 for the height. Do make sure your room heights are correct, because I see that all the time, that people's room heights, they might be 1.7 meters tall, and a normal person is about, you know, I think that's probably about average, so they'll be hitting their head. And of course, if you have a scene where it's a really low room, then that's fine. But you know, if you have space to go between 2.8 to 3 meters, and then just, you know, do this and extrude the room out how you want it to be. Sorry, there we go. Then you can, of course, use, this is the method I'll probably using just for now, because you can just do this and do this and select this face and E and then X, and then you have a window or a door. And this is a method which I really like, only because if it's my own project, because then I can kind of, you know, add loop cuts where I like, and just try to really grow and make the room how I want it to be. But you can also, if you do want to get rid of all these lines, if you're kind of finished, you just do X and limited dissolve. And then what that does is that once you've kind of got the finished shape and you've cut out all the windows, it then cleans up all the edges, so there's no more loop cuts anywhere else. Then you can just grab any face and bring it to where you want it to be, and you're not kind of limited anymore by having, you know, if you have loads of loop cuts, you'll end up you have to grab them all first. So if you just do AX, limited dissolve, and then it also shows you the correct dimensions as well. And then if you go to face orientation, make sure that the room is facing the right way, so that when you're inside, the normals are facing the correct way. So let me just quickly make a room, and then I'll be back in a second. Okay, so I have a room shape now which I quite like, and what I've done over here is I've also extruded out a line which goes up, and then this is where I will hide the curtain rail. So the curtain will basically sit up here, and I think that is a bit smarter. I think you don't really want to be seeing too much of that. Now is a good time, let me just actually turn off the floor because I don't want to be seeing these lines. Now is a good time to separate the floor. So once the floor is kind of set and you're happy with it, what you just do is just separate it. You can keep it attached, but I like to separate it just so that it's an individual part. I think that it just kind of makes it easier to work with, because you can do things like this, that if you duplicate it, you can just do F3, convert to curve, then you have an exact copy, and then you can use this curve later on for making skirting boards. So you can just extrude it out. I mean, it won't look like this, but it'll be something similar to like this. But you can use a profile to give you a nice bevel that you'd like. So I'm just going to delete that for now, and then we just have this floor. Okay, so there are different things you can kind of do at this step. You could add some lighting, you could add some models, you could set up the camera, but I think that just to start with, I'm going to start adding the lighting, because I usually get way too excited to add the lighting, and I can then use the lighting as it goes on and keep doing preview renders throughout the whole time, just to see that my model colors are working together, and it's more easily to see how it's going. But you can of course start adding models and start adding like lamps, plants, and just try to block out how your room will look, just to see if things feel too cluttered, do areas feel too empty, and in generally just block out your room that way. Then you can start adding the lighting and then start working on the materials. So there's no real right or wrong way, but like I said, I always get way too excited, so I just want to start adding the lighting straight away. And then it kind of sets the route at which you want to go down later on anyway. So like I said, I'm just going to start working on the lighting and just show you several different methods. So in a previous video, I did show you that you could add just a sunlight. So you could add a light and then a sun, and just do this and then set the angle to be something large like this. Let me just unplug here. So this adds a sun, size to 10, and then you can start to see the light coming into the room. The lower the angle, the more direct the sun will be. So if you want stronger shadows, then that works. Please look at the previous tutorial if you want to use this method. But there are different methods now too. So there is now a sky texture with a Nishita sun and sky. I think this was actually available in the previous tutorial, but I quite liked adding the sunlight because then you can choose the angle yourself more manually. Whereas this one, it adds a sun, but you don't really know where the sun is going to be. Wow, that's a big sun. Anyway, so let's go into here. So a cool thing with adding this sun and sky texture, you can make the light from the sky quite white, turn off all the air, make a nice even light coming into the scene, and then you could add a sun, and then you can add another more stronger light coming in. Let me just turn this right down. So you can get more stronger shadows in certain areas. But the reason why I like to make such a white light is because I think that it looks a lot more realistic, and if you look at a lot of my references, they all have a similar sort of method to making a nice clean white light. You can of course add a sunlight later on, that's definitely not wrong, but I think that it's easier to get better results if it's nice and clean. I think the reason is because it's quite often in real life a cloudy day, and it's almost like the world becomes its own light softbox, and everyone knows what it looks like when it's pure white outside. Everyone knows how soft the lighting should be, and it just looks more familiar, especially if you live in places like England. I think it's more often a white sky than it is a sunny sky, and I think that it's also easier to control than adding other sunlights and stuff like this. And also if you go into a studio setting, so let's say IKEA, when they make their renders or when they photograph their furniture, I know they also do a lot of renders themselves, but if they were to photograph their furniture, it would probably be in a controlled setting inside somewhere in a warehouse with lights that emulate a skylight. So people, I think, are more familiar with that sort of studio white lighting on an image in more professional settings than they are with suns. But if you want to add a sunlight, then absolutely go wild. But I'm not going to do that in this tutorial. Maybe I'll do another one later on with a sunlight, because I was thinking of doing a Mediterranean style theme, and adding a sunlight is nice. But what I do like to do if there is a sunlight is to actually make it feel like it's in the evening, and add a nice evening sun. Yeah, something similar to like this, but obviously not just like this, but you get the idea. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a white light, but instead of adding this sky texture, I am just going to use a HDR, because what I find that is you can add the sky texture, you can find the right settings for you, but what is always going to be the easiest is probably just going to be a HDR. So I have a load of ones from here. I think they're all from, or mostly from HDRI Heaven, because they're free, and I'm just going to use a Waterbuck Trail 2K. Also, don't get confused, 8K doesn't mean it's more realistic. If I add this one here, let me just replace the background. This lighting here is going to look absolutely identical to this lighting here. But the problem is that, as you can see here, that it takes a lot longer to load. But I guarantee that the lighting is almost identical. The only difference is, see how quick that loads now? So if I move around the scene, or turn this off, go into rendered view, it renders straight away. But if I was to add 8K, you can see that it does take some time to load. So if I go solid view, then rendered view, it needs to wait for the image to load, and then it starts. So always start off with a 2K, especially if you're not going to look out the window, because that's the only time you really need a higher resolution HDRI. You also do need a higher resolution HDRI if, for example, you have an object which is reflective and you can actually see the HDR in there, because this looks super horrible here. And I think I'm just going to rotate this to about 180 degrees, because then we do get a bit of a landscape out there. That's what I like to do. I like to add HDRIs because it's super quick and it is going to look really nice. And then I'm probably just going to bump this lighting up to, I don't know, 5 or something, just to light the scene nice and bright. Now I'm going to add a portal. So if I go into edit mode for this object, I'm going to select this face and do Shift S, cursor to selected, and then I'm going to do A and light and add an area light. If you're using e-cycles, this is really quick because all you need to do is you need to have a face, you right click and then you click add portal. But this is just the vanilla blender, so I'm just going to add a portal light here. So just make sure that this fits nice and snug into the window. Make sure it's facing inside, and SZ, and just make sure that this fits to the size of the window. And then you go over to here and hit portal. And then what that will do is it makes the render much faster. Now if I go to this object here, what I don't like having these lines, and they're always so big. And in Eevee, what you can do is you can go over to the light and then you can choose a custom distance, and you can set this to like 0.05, and then it's really small. And then if you go back to cycles, the light is no longer that size. Of course, if you want to render in Eevee, you don't want to be changing that, but you know, now I don't have a huge line all over my scene. It would be nice if there was also that option in cycles, and maybe there is, but I haven't found it yet. So anyway, that is nice. And now if I render the scene, it should clean up a lot quicker than if there wasn't a portal there. Okay, and I think that's probably going to be it for the lighting for now. I might adjust it a little bit later, or I might keep it like this, but just to get the idea of how the room is going to feel, how the colors are going to work together, I'm just going to work with this for now. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about now is actually the materials for the walls and the floors. So I think I'm going to do this at this step here, just so that I can get an idea of how the room is going to start to feel, because as soon as you add a wood floor, the feeling for the room completely changes. So you can get here, there's a lot of light bouncing on the walls, and the room starts to feel a lot more realistic as soon as you add a wood floor, basically. And I've already been adjusting some of these levels, but first note, because this is an 8K texture, then your viewport's going to lag every single time you want to make a change, because for some reason Blender insists on updating this preview even though you're not looking at it. So if I change that, there we go, it's crashed again. So a very quick and easy fix, just go to another tab, and there we go. So you can then adjust it here. You can also go to render settings and change to simplify, or you could just use a 4K texture. But this is an 8K texture, and we do have some free ones on iMeshh. It could be 8K, but we also offer 16K, and that is because we want to allow people to have the ability to also go really close to the wood floors if they do want to, and still get a really high quality wood floor. And it's also like a 5-meter texture or something, or 4.5. So it should fill your room quite nicely without seeing too much repetition. So one thing I do like to do is to adjust the dirt level first, because I think it's a bit hard to see the dirt too much when there is roughness on. But if you turn roughness all the way down, maybe roughness contrast down, and the only difference we'll start to see now, like these patches appearing here, this will only be the dirt. So you can then adjust the dirt to be the right level, and then we can add the roughness from the ground later. So honestly, I think that's fine. Dirt fall off, I recommend you check out my wood floor video, and that explains what this does. But it's basically the closer you get to the floor, the more dirt you'll see, and the higher up you get, the less dirt you'll see. So you'll start to see it mostly at the edges than anywhere else. And then I just want to add some roughness from the floor, and then maybe a little bit more contrast, because I always think that when there's a bit more contrast to the actual wood grain, so you can start to see a lot more of the wood grain appearing, I think that looks a lot more realistic and just quite nice. I did choose this wood floor because I thought that my reference is that the scenes are quite bright and quite light, that these wood floors will be too dark, and these ones will be maybe too bright. So this one is kind of a nice mix between. It's a really pale wood, but I think that it looks nice, and I think it will fit to what I'm aiming for a little bit later. Now for the actual walls, let's just go have a look at the walls. What I want to do is actually find a texture, and there is actually one by, I think his name is Alex Bowen, and he's released a free one which is amazing, and also another one which is paid, and I highly recommend you buy this from this guy. It's a really high quality texture, and I think I'll probably be using this one in this scene because it always looks nice. I know that this looks like it's more for an outdoor stucco kind of style, but if you add it to the interior just really lightly, and it'll still look quite nice. So I'm going to add that in. But first of all, we do need to unwrap this scene. Now, there are many different ways to unwrap the scene. People did say that my way last time was incorrect, but it really doesn't matter. So what I basically did was I basically unwrapped it properly. So I try to unwrap it because every single model that I make, the unwrapping needs to be correct. So I like to make sure that there is as much continuity as possible running between the walls. So if I just go to here, add a new, and just add a checker texture, and Shift T and go here. So now if we go like this, we can see that there is an absolute mess, but this is what we'll be able to use to actually find out the unwrapping. So what I could do here is just select these faces and then unwrap. And then what we can see here is that you can see that this does continue on and go around. And you can of course just do A, U, and then Smart UV unwrap. And that does work too, but you can see that these no longer line up. And the thing is, when there is a stucco wall texture, the texture will be so subtle that you will never really be able to tell that it doesn't actually fully line up. So it's not the end of the world if that isn't the case. I do automatically, like I did in my last tutorial, I did try to unwrap it so there is as much continuity as possible, but you know, it doesn't really matter too much. And also you have to make sure that the UVs are the correct size, so this should be something similar to this anyway. Okay, so there is also another method to unwrapping some walls. And in 3D Studio Max there is a method called Box UV Unwrap, and that allows you to create a box and project onto the object with a box. And you can do that the same in Blender. Like this, you can set it to generated and set it to box, and then that creates this here, and then you can adjust the scale like this and just try to get it to fit how you want it to be. And you can also move it around to make sure that it fits the continuity of the scene, like something like that. And you know, this is also fine. You know, there's no one wrong way or right way. And someone in a previous video said that I should use this way, and you know, I don't personally like this method. I just prefer to just quickly unwrap the scene. You know, you could just do Smart UV unwrap, and that also works fine. Let me just actually do UV and set this back to flat. Okay, and just for speed, just for this tutorial, I'm just going to do Smart UV unwrap, and then that will be fine. And then that also means that all the sides are going to be the correct dimensions. And then all I need to do here is then just make sure I just turn this up, or maybe not that high. And this is also the plaster one that I told you about, but I'm just going to set this to diffuse and just plug that into here and just see how this looks. Okay, and then go over here, but I might actually change this. Let me just add another one and set this to glossiness, non-color data, and because it's glossiness going into roughness, I'm just going to invert this. And then I want to add a normal, and the normal is going to be the most important for adding bump to the wall, because you know, when you paint a wall there isn't going to be much texture. Okay, there we go. So this is looking really bumpy and quite messy, so I'm probably going to detach the diffuse just so I have a nice white room. And I don't know, I think I'm also going to mix in this one because I don't want it to be too varied in the, actually is that coming from the normal map? Okay, I think the glossiness level is actually fine. I think it just has a nice bit of variation quite subtly, but I think the normal map might be a bit too strong, so let's just put this to 0.1. because I just want to see like the suggestion that there is not a completely smooth wall. So I'm just zooming in now. I'm just going to do a quick preview just to see how the bump is coming out. But when we come to the final renders, I might also adjust this a little bit later, but you can kind of see the effect here. So I think that is now a nice setting for us moving forwards. I think actually one thing we might need to do is add a bevel to the walls. Okay, so now I'm going to add some beveling, and in a previous video I talked about several different methods. So you can just add a bevel like this, and then if you want to shade smooth, then you get some weird shading artifacts. So what you can just go do is go to here, harden normals, and then click onto here, and then that fixes this weird shading that's going on. But I do prefer my own method. It's probably completely unnecessary at this point, but I don't mind. I'm just going to add a bevel. I'm going to set the profile to 1. And I'm add another one here. And so that's basically doing no beveling at all. All that it's doing is adding some supporting edges like this, and then what we're going to do is add a bevel in between. So then when we add a smooth shading later, I think that it adds a bit more of a realistic result. But yeah, find whichever method you prefer. Look at my previous video and see why I do this method, but you know, add whichever one you prefer. I'm going to actually set this to % and turn it up to something like this, and then we're going to add some bevel in between, and then I can shade smooth, and then that'll be a nice smooth edge without needing to do any auto smooth. And that is kind of the maybe I'll add a little bit more, maybe to 0.004. And yeah, so that is kind of all the beveling you kind of really need. You can of course add some more. So let's see how this looks. There will be some gaps now at the bottom by the wood floors, but what we can actually do is add a skirting board a little bit later anyway, which will cover that, so I wouldn't worry about that too much. So now we have some nice smooth edges, we have some nice walls, and we have some floors. Okay, so I'm probably going to start talking about the camera for now. I think that I'm going to talk about the camera just so that we have something to work off of and just to find how the room will look. You can, of course, like I said at the beginning, you can find furniture and start blocking out the whole room if you do have the whole room. But just for this shot, I'm only really going to be making one shot anyway. And I know it's probably going to be looking in this kind of direction because I have something in my head anyway. So I thought I'll set up the camera and then we can start building furniture into the shot rather than the other way around. So one thing to note is that you can see here is that the camera is not straight. The line here is going down like this, whereas the edge of the line is going straight, and that is because the camera is not straight. So I want to straighten it. And someone in the previous video, they said that 90 degrees is not very creative. So the fact is that if you look at every single professional render, I guarantee that 99% of them are going to have a square parallel lines going down for every single shot that they have. They might do have some, there is of course more creative things to do. You could do a top-down shot like this. You could do a close-up shot where you're looking down at something close to the floor or on a table or something like this. But if you want to have a full shot, the idea is you really want to have it 90 degrees, because if you have it up like this, your room is going to start feel like it's wonky. It feels like the room is falling. It's going to be very subtle sometimes, maybe even like this, but it might just feel a little bit off. But if you just want to go with something, be safe, go over here and make sure that the camera is 90 degrees. Now the next thing I want to talk about is actually the field of view, depth of field, or the f-stop. Here I've got it set to 5.6, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually choose the focal distance a little bit later, but while we're talking about camera settings I'll just discuss the f-stop. And I chose f5.6 because a lot of professional cameras have lenses which would have an f-stop of like 3.5 to 5.6. That is a very standard lens. So if you set an f-stop to 5.6, what that does is that it is a f-stop which people are familiar with. So the things which are closer to the camera will be blurry, things which are in focus will of course be in focus, and things further away will be out of focus. And I think that if you use a f-stop which is probably going to be used more likely in photographs, it might actually add to the realism and trick people into thinking, this looks familiar, I can't tell you why, but I think that it looks realistic. So that is probably fine for that. I did, at the beginning I did add a passe-partout, just to add this to the frame so you can actually get an idea of what you're working with. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about camera dimensions or the image resolution. And the fact is that, and it really depends on where the image is going to be used in the end. So does your client want it to be for social media? Then if so, it's probably going to be square, or they're probably going to have a higher, taller frame, or is it going to be used on a website? You know, where is this image going to be used in the end? Now, in a previous tutorial, I did say that it's good to render it in a square frame, and that is true. I think the good thing with that is that you can render it in a full frame, and then you can just do crops into certain areas if you like. If you prefer what it's going to look like over here, then you can do a crop, and you have a lot more place to You've got a lot more space to work with and crop it later on. Now that does have the disadvantage that if you were to work with it in a square frame, and when in the end result is probably not going to be a square frame, then it does make it harder for you to then work on the correct composition. So for example, if it's going to be like this in the end, and you add a chair, let's add just a really basic chair, and this is going to be slightly off of the frame here, then you might think, yeah, that looks good, but then as soon as you go to the full frame, it's going to look completely different. So you might be working like this, being like, well, I think it's going to look good here, when, you know, in the end, it might look good. You might go with a frame like this, and then you think that it looks better here. It's just harder to work with. So it might be easier to work with the frame that you think is going to look good in the end, and then when you do render it a full square image, and then you can crop it then again anyway. So what I'm going to do now is just find a frame which I think looks nice. But what frame size do you use? It really doesn't matter. I think that if you find a frame which you think looks good, then it works. You could also go with the correct dimensions for like an actual camera. So for a Canon, for example, my camera, I think it actually renders in, it takes photographs in frame sizes like this. But you can, of course, make it bigger. I think the advantage with doing it with a frame which is similar to, actually, I think this is my Pixel phone dimensions. The advantage with that is that people are also familiar with those camera sizes. So it makes it look more like it's taken from a photograph than if it was like a weird frame like this, for example. So, but yeah, anyway, I'm probably going to do something like this because I think that it looks nice. If you want to go with a real life camera frame size, then go for that. If not, then whatever you choose to go with. So that is the camera frame. I'm probably going to change the angle of this camera as time goes on, but this gives us a good base to work with, and then I can work on start filling the scene. I might think that the camera might need to move more to the right or more to the left, or look more out the window. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to start talking about, and that is color palette. And a color palette is basically the selection of colors which work together in a scene to make sure that the scene looks nice. So if for example in this scene, if we suddenly add a bright blue wall, that suddenly won't fit. So the idea is to find a nice color palette to then go forward, so that if you're working and you start adding some furniture and all of the furniture are all different colors, it allows you to more focus on making sure that you can change the colors after you upload and make sure that they fit together. And there is this website here, which is incredible. So you find an image which you like on Pinterest, for example, and you upload it, and it gives you a selection of colors. Now this one, I think that this color here is a lot more dominant than it is saying here. So it would be nice if this color was on here as well, but it does give you some ideas. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to screenshot it. I'm just going to drop it into my scene, and then I have this to work with. So we already have the white walls and the light color floor, and we can kind of then start adding in some furniture and making sure that they also fit to the same color palette. If you did particularly like certain colors from this image and it's not actually showing in that color palette, what you can actually do is that you can use Photoshop, and you can make maybe this color here and just do Control-C, Control-V, and just hold down Control, select this. I think you can actually do this in Affinity Photo as well, but for now we'll just do it in Photoshop. You go to Blur and click Average. Then that selects that color, and now that is basically the color of that curtain. And you can also do it to here. So I quite like these greens, so I'm just going to copy, paste, select this and do Filter, Blur, Average. And then we can kind of get a rough color for the green if we're going to start adding some plants. And that green also seems to fit quite nicely with everything else. So that's really nice. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to edit this color palette just so that I also include these colors here. So let's just grab these two and drag them into this file here, and just bring this one here. And do something like this. Okay, that's nice. I think I'm just trying to find somewhere where it fits. Okay, that is cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clap these and save this file. And then in Blender, if I just reopen this image, and then it will also show these two. So now we have something to work with. So this is really cool. I think that adding a color palette to the scene keeps you focused throughout the whole project, and if it's always here in the corner, it's just always easy to reference. So there's also more things you can do with a color palette, and that is if you go to here and, oops, let me just go over here, press I, select this color, Let's copy that, and we just paste that into here, and it will tell me it is a hex color, and that is true. And it will also tell me if there are any other kind of complementary colors, such as a purples and this kind of blue here. If you're not quite happy with this and you want some more colors, then you can of course find some more complementary colors. Okay, so I've actually just gone into this material and given it a viewport color just so I can differentiate. So what furniture should we add first? And it really depends on the room that you're choosing to make. So you could make a bedroom or a kitchen, and in this particular scene I'm going to be making a living room, dining area, kitchen. And for a lot of the rooms, a sofa is going to be the focus. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a sofa here. And I'm choosing this one because I have actually got a video on YouTube where I have showed you how I made this sofa, so you can follow along and make this one yourself if you want to. I'm not sure, it might actually be a time lapse, or I can't remember if I actually told you how I did it. And let's just bring this over here like this, and then that is fine. So now we can just see that that should look quite nice, and we can then change the colors of the sofa as well, but I think that this is quite close to this color anyway. But let's have a look. If I was to change the diffuse to, I'm just curious how it will look if I choose this one. So it is a bit darker. So let's just plug this one into here and just choose something like, I don't know, 0.5. Let's just go with that for now. And I think that is quite close to that color. And the wall behind is definitely brighter. And we can then also change the color of the blanket as well to also fit into one of these. So I'm just going to go over here and choose the, I think, which one is it? Whoa, I still have lengths turned on. Length, and let's just select this one here. Okay, so that's fabric stripe 005, and let's just have a look. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a mix RGB, and then I'm going to select a color. Let's say, for example, this one, and then I'm just going to do maybe colorize it, set it to 1, and then that should fit then. Okay, cool. I'm going to just do the same thing for this one here because there's also stripes around the edge, and you can do something like this. So that is how it will be in that. So that's an easy way to make sure that your furniture fits into similar sort of colors. Right then, so what should we add next? I think that the next big thing that's going to be part of this scene, and that is a kitchen. And also on iMeshh, this is, God, I really don't mean for this to be a promotion, but we have it. That's so we have kitchens. And if you go over here, we have some full kitchens. And these kitchens were actually made by our resident kitchen expert. He's actually been doing kitchens for, I don't know, 12 years or something. So all the kitchens are made to the correct dimensions. And if you want to follow on to this tutorial, then you can, of course, look online to find some plans. And these plans will generally show you the standard sizes which these kitchens should have. And I think they are slightly different between the US and England. But if you want to, of course, follow along, just go on to Google and you'll be able to find some of these plans and try to recreate something similar to this. But that is basically how it works. But in here we just have a bunch of ready-made kitchens for you. And we can see that this kitchen is also already to a similar color palette to the kind of thing I'm going for anyway. But what I do notice is that this wood in here is going to be way too strong. So here is a really bright orange, but we don't really have here any sort of bright orangey kind of wood color. So let's just go over to here and let's just detach this, and then let's just choose another color, for example this one, and that is going to be too dark. Actually, let's try this white here. And I think that actually looks quite nice, but I think I might actually go a bit more into a color, but then just turn down the saturation, make it a little bit brighter, so it's a similar kind of hue, and then that should be fine. Okay, and you can kind of see that we're starting to get a room here. If you have this setting here, I'd recommend you turn this to optics and make sure you have color and albedo. You can also set it to color, albedo and normal if you like to, and then that allows you to clean up the image super fast. Oops. So let's just do this, and adding normal allows it to denoise a bit better, but I think it is a little bit slower. But yeah, so you can see how everything's starting to come together, and I think it's starting to look really cool. One thing I do notice that is quite a focus in this image here is also a plant. So let's just add a plant. and I think I'm probably going to go with either a yucca plant or a monstera, but I think this one could look good. It's actually quite similar to this one here, so let's just add this one in and check that one out. But I think the colors are going to be a little bit wrong. I thought the thing also should be a little bit bigger. Now, there are different things you can do in this space. So let's say you're making a space and there is a big space like this. One thing you can do is just bring this sofa over a little bit. You can also add a cabinet. You can add a picture frame. You can add a little unit here. You can also add a little coffee table by the side of the sofa. There are a million other things that you can add into this particular area, but I think that a plant will fit quite nicely into this space. But I think that I might bring this over a little bit, and also the kitchen. Select the collection, bring this over a little bit, and then also bring the camera over. Why can I never select the camera? Someone please tell me. But in Blender 2.79 you used to be able to select it. Anyway, okay, so let's just move this over like this, and yeah, that's fine. So let's just bring this over. And one thing I do note is that there are three stems, so it's good to just make sure you can see all of them and make sure that it's at the ground. Yeah, so there we go. And then we can just see if the green is going to be the correct color, but I don't think it's going to be. I think it's going to be a little bit too blue. Actually, I think that's actually pretty close. So I'm probably going to leave that there like that. And okay, so I still think that there is a little bit too much space by the side of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this and bring everything just a little bit more over. It doesn't matter if we can see more kitchen, because you know the kitchen looks good anyway. So we can bring that in there like that. So now this all feels like it fits, and there's not too much empty space. But we can also move the camera a little bit later. But there's actually, let's bring this sofa a bit further over and make sure this is centered. And something like this. Now there are also a million other things you can also add above a sofa, but this is quite big empty white space, so you want to kind of fill this with something. You could add picture frames, you can add some wall lights, you can also cut out a window and make a window here to show a nice scenery. But for me, I think I'm just going to add some wall decorations, and in this case I'm actually going to add some recent lights that we made. And let's go to wall lights and select these ones here. These ones are actually incredibly popular, so I might have to make more of these types of lights. So let's rotate this 90 degrees, and then let's just delete these ones and we'll work with this. So, okay, so I'm going to add these lights here. These lights also have a similar issue. It would really be nice if I could change the length here, but I can't. So let's just bring this down to, like, I don't know, 1 meter. And then we can also click this one and click this one and do Control L and then link object data. And then I believe if we change 1 to 1, then this one is also set to 1. So these are going to be this similar brightness anyway, so let's just make sure that they are linked. And then we want to maybe bring these up, maybe make them a little bit smaller and move them over the sofa. This one here, I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees because I think that might look quite funky. And there we go. Let's just make sure it is actually against the wall. Yeah, okay. And then we can see how this looks. I think that is quite a nice use of that space. Okay, now that is starting to look pretty cool. I do also like the color of this light. I think that it is maybe a little bit too orange, but we can also use this to our advantage that we choose a light color, which is also quite similar to here. Let's just make this maybe not as bright, but something like this. Not as saturated, sorry. Just something like this. This optics denoising in the viewport is crazy. Anyway, this needs to have a little bit more red, I think. Make it a little bit warmer. Okay, yeah, I think that's fine. I think that will look quite cool in the end. So I'm probably going to sit with that. I do feel like the camera is a little bit far away, so I might actually work on the camera a little bit just to make it fit. Okay, I've just made another camera, and I think that this camera might fit a little bit better. I think what I'm going to do is move over this kitchen unit, because I did like the space that was between this sofa just for this plant, but then this was getting in the way. So if we just move this over, we can also maybe move the camera just up a little bit, just so we can see over these kitchen units, because earlier it was similar, it was almost like this, and it was almost quite hard to see that there was a gap between them. So if we just go a little bit higher, just so we can get a little bit more context from this area. then that'll work quite nicely. That is looking pretty good. So now we need to start adding some stuff in the foreground here. And there are different things you can do. You could add a coffee table, or you could add a lounge chair, some seating areas over here. But I think what I'm actually going to do is actually add a little dining table here. So let me just add, go for the thing, it's under seating. And this one here. Okay, that's fine. Let's just bring this up. Okay, and the reason why I'm going to add a table here is because I think that they look quite nice, and some people might be saying, oh, but where will the people have the TV? And the fact is that not everyone has a TV. I think that it really destroys the space. So if we were, for example, to add a TV here on this wall, and then the only thing that could really go here is some lounge chairs, for example. But that is boring. I don't think they really say too much in this particular scene anyway. You could, of course, add a lounge chair to the scene, but then there's no more space for anything else. In this particular scene, there's another whole seating area in the back. But if we just added a chair here and a chair here, it's almost like this space is dead. If we add something here like a table, it kind of makes it feel like there is more going on behind the camera. It makes you want to know what is happening behind the camera. But of course, some people might say, well, you could just turn the TV this round and add a TV here, but there's nothing more ugly than the back of a sofa. So let's just add this in. If you add a sofa with a table in front, it does also feel like it's quite an open space, and it makes it feel like it's quite inviting and more of a people space rather than a TV, which I think is overused. So let me just add a chair here, and I'm gonna turn this just a little bit so we can see the second armrest here. And if I duplicate this one and bring this round, I don't think we'll see it, but let's just put this here anyway. Okay, nice. And I think that it would also be nice to add move these ones over so we can kind of maybe see the edge of one of these cups, just to add some sort of, some story going on over here. And that, I think, will look quite nice. Okay, perfect. And the advantage with these chairs as well is that this color is also already quite close to the color palette. So, but this color here isn't. I think this is a bit too blue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the color of this cloth to maybe, I might actually make it fit this here. And also this mug is also quite close to this color, but I think this is also maybe a little bit too blue. Let's just change that. Okay, perfect. And maybe make it a bit brighter. Okay, and then let's make this chair fit this too. And select this one and cloth. And then let's mix, set it to color. And we can just choose this one here. There we go. I think that's already looking better. It's looking more green anyway. Okay, that is looking quite nice. I think that when the final image is done, I will add a little bit more contrast. So just so I can see what's going on, I'm just going to add a little bit more contrast, and we can start to see how this is looking. I think this lighting is actually coming out really nice. So now I think I am going to add a window and something hanging here, because this is now a space which is kind of unused, and I don't really want to look outside because it does look like the building is floating, which is not ideal. So what we're going to do is just add some windows. So what I'm going to do here is just go and add a window. Yeah, I think I'm probably just going to add this one here, actually, just a really simple one. And I think when this model was made, it didn't use the new window technique for Blender 2.9. So I'll show you what to do here. So I'm just going to go into here. Let's just go into here and press go to here and click on the glass, and I want to separate that, and also for this one, it's hidden. Okay, and I want to just make sure I've got that, select, and then separate those. And what I want to do is just select these two and also go to here and turn on visibility only to the camera and transmission. And then for the actual node setup, what I'm going to do is just go to Principled Shader, click on here, make sure that it is full white. Then I want to turn down roughness and turn transmission to full. But what I can see is that there are a couple of planes in here. So what I'm just going to do is just delete a few, because we only really want the ones which are closest to on this side of the window. Okay, and then that is fine. So now I want to keep these attached, but let's just go and select everything, and then we can just edit this. So let's just bring this up so it fits like this, and then let's bring this over here. Okay, now I do want this frame to be about this thin, so instead of scaling this up, what I am going to do is just go into edit mode and then just bring these edges up, and then that will keep the thickness. So let's bring this up. And then we have some windows. So what we see here, by setting this only visible to the transmission, is that we'll only see the transmission part of this. But if we set this to something like oh, this one also needs to be set to transmission only, because if we set this to diffuse or shadow, it will start casting shadows and stuff like this, but we only want to see the glass part of the glass. Blender glass is a little bit funny, so that is what you have to do for now. And that's looking nice. Actually, I think I want these window frames to be a little bit whiter so they fit more into the frame, and then we can start thinking about adding a curtain. Okay, but I think what I am going to do actually is grab this window and make sure that it is about the same size as the other one, because it's not actually. So let's just bring this over to something like this, because I think that would also be nice to see another edge. Oh, this camera is not straight. Let's just select this one, item, and 90. There we go. Okay, and then we'll be able to see that one. Yes. Okay, cool. And now I want to add something over here. So I thought I might add a curtain. So let's just go over here and add a curtain. I have actually got a tutorial. I think it's called how to add a cinematograph to Blender. And I actually show you how to make a quick curtain. So if you don't want to add a ready-made model, then that is there. Let's add a curtain. I think this one. And let's just go into here and delete this one. You can, of course, because I've made it so that you can add a blowing curtain. So if you did actually want to do that, that could also be nice. Because if you add it like, whoop, like this and something like this, you can have one side blowing in on the corner with this curtain, with this door open. Then that could work. Actually, let me see how that looks if I do this. And let's just also delete this frame. And let's bring this one over. So let me just delete one side of it. And so we're almost touching the ground, because it's quite nice when the curtains are just basically touching the ground. And you can kind of see what I mean now about this section here. So let's just scale this down so that the curtain kind of hides away up there. I could just scale it up a little bit more. And it's going through the wall here, so let's just scale it in a little bit and bring it over. The good thing with curtains is that you can kind of scale it quite a lot without it looking like it's incorrect. So it's the benefit of fabrics. I'm not sure if I'm going to do this, but I just want to see how it looks. It might be a bit too much, but we can see. So let's just do a render preview. Okay, and I think that curtain is actually quite nice. I think it adds quite a lot to the scene, but I do think that this gap is a little bit too much. So let's just bring this over and let's do something like this. So it does look like it's only affecting that one curtain, which is just by the window, and we'll see if we want to keep it. I think that's fine, but I think I want to have a little bit more light coming out. So let me just try and make this a bit brighter like this. And I think I can also try turning off certain things, because it is making a lot of it's casting quite a lot of shadows into the scene. So if I only make it visible to camera, because the thing is that these curtains, they're meant to be really light, and they're not really meant to stop too much light coming into the scene. So if I make it only visible to the camera, it's actually not that bad. and it still looks quite illuminated. If I just actually attach these two together, let's just grab this and attach them so that they copy the same sort of settings down here. That is the problem with these sort of curtains, is that they cast a lot of noise into the scene. So you imagine the light is coming through the curtain, and then all of the light for the scene is casting through there. So if you just make it visible to camera, that can help. But I think I'm just going to turn these off for now. But when we get to the final render, I might adjust this a little bit. But I want to do it like this just so I can see how the room looks with the curtains, and it doesn't look too incorrect at this point. But when we do the final render, I might then adjust that a bit more. So I think that the light coming in from this side is a bit too dark. In the previous render I showed you the technique about adding a black backdrop to add more contrast to the left of the scene, but I think that I want it to suggest that there is a lot more going on over here, and one way to do that is to actually add a light. So what I'm going to do is add a light, an area light like this, and then just move it off of the camera. So let's just do it from this one. So as if someone left the door open or something, and let's just do it like this. And I think that adds a little bit of a highlight to certain objects from this side. So if I was to turn that one off, yeah, I think that should actually be enough, and it just might add a little bit more something to this side of the scene. Okay, great. So now what I want to do is just fill up this space here. So what I'm going to do is actually add a coffee table, and I think I've got one in here. Coffee table. I think one of these ones. So these ones are really cool. I really like the colors on these, but I think I'm going to destroy them when I try to choose a different color. Okay, and in this case, what we have here is actually a red and green coffee table, but I think I'm going to probably change that to be something a bit clear. But the one thing to note about the Blender glass shader is that in some cases, in this case, it'll probably work fine. You can drop in this coffee table and look fine, and you wouldn't really notice any problems. But if in certain cases, if you do have like a spotlight or a strong light, you can't then see any actual caustics or anything. The shadows are really strong. But there is a really easy way to fix that, and that's is actually to find somebody who's already made a glass shader which is a lot more in depth, and they've taken a very long time to construct a node group which allows you to have caustics. It has proper shadows and everything, and the easiest way to do that, is to go onto like something like Blender Market, and you can find and append in something like this. I'd recommend you check out this guy. He made this glass shader, and it's incredible. The lighting that comes out of it is almost like perfect. And now what we can do here is add in the material, and then we can then set up to be the glass what I wanted to aim for. And you can kind of already see here that the shadows are coming through really nicely, and then we can just build on that. But what I did also like in the previous one was actually this glossy and normal, and I'm just going to drop that into here as well because that looks really pretty fantastic with these ones on. So now we get the benefit of both. Like I said, it's not totally important to have these shadows because I don't think you would even notice in most scenes, especially how the glass is so dark anyway. But just because I want to make this glass clear, it might suggest that there should be actually more light coming through. So I am actually going to change that in this case. And you can see here that it's with this normal map and everything, it's looking pretty nice. So I'm just going to adjust the other one to be the same. Link materials. Okay. And then I'm just going to delete this. I'm going to set the world back to 5. And then let's see how this looks in the actual scene. Okay, it's too far away from the sofa. Actually, I think the sofa, I'm going to reflect this on the other side, because I think that if this was over on this side, then there'd be more space over here, more space closer to the camera. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do object, mirror, and X. Oh, okay, wrong one, but never mind. Rotate it 180 degrees. Okay, and then bring this a bit further away from the wall. And there we go. So now it should look a little bit more inviting into the space over here. So let's just bring this over, and we can see how this looks. I still think that this is going to be too saturated in color for the glass. Okay, I think that is probably fine for now. And next I'm going to start working on some other, I think some interior lights, because on a lot of the references that I had, there was some spotlights along the ceiling, and I quite like that. So I'm going to try and add something similar. And we have just made some new spotlights, and I haven't tried them out in a proper scene yet. So I want to see how they turn out. So go to spotlights, and I think I'll choose this one here. And where has that gone? Okay, maybe make them a bit bigger. And let's just turn off. Let's just delete this one because I want it to be white. And let's just bring this down here. Okay, cool. I think that maybe should be a little bit smaller. Nice. And then let's just bring this over. And then I'm just going to do Alt-D and then bring this over maybe once, and then Shift-R to duplicate that. And then I'm just going to do Alt-D again, maybe bring some over here. Just to maybe something like this, but I think actually I want these to look like they're more evenly spaced. So if I bring this to here, then bring this one more into the center. Okay, that's fine. So let's just do this one here and put this one there. Right, so what's cool about these lights is that you can actually pinpoint where you want it to go. So let's go to the constraints, just turn this on, and this one. And now what happens is that we can actually point which direction the light is actually going to be shining. I think that the reason why I like this particular spotlight is because it goes all the way down, or it can also be angled. So, I mean, you can see here that I'm pointing the light, which is really nice, because I hate it when you download spotlights from a 3D model place and they're static and you have to edit it, go into edit mode, move the object, then move the lighting. So anyway, that's why I made this like this. Okay, what I'm going to do actually is move this more closer into the object. There we go, that's better. I'm going to do that with all of them. Just so it looks like there's actual light coming off of the lamp. Okay, I think that should be nice. Right, so I see another complaint by a lot of people saying that lights are not turned on in the daytime. And the fact is that that's just complete false, as if nobody has accidentally left the light on in daytime. And the thing is, in renders, what looks good is, sorry, let me just turn on this constraint. What looks good in architectural visualization is always a spotlight glare. And if you can add some nice little spots that maybe don't actually contribute too much to the scene, because I am actually going to turn this light down a little bit, so it doesn't actually cast much to the scene, but it does give a nice little glare star, then that looks really cool, and I think that looks really nice. And if that is some extra detail that you can add to your scene, then go crazy. Turn your lights on in the daytime. There are so many references where there are similar sort of spotlights turned on, but people would never complain because these renders look fantastic. But like I said, try not to make them actually contribute too much to the scene, not as much as I've actually got here, but actually just try to reduce them just so you have a little bit of a spotlight effect coming from the actual spotlight, and then you can work from there. Okay, and yeah, so these lights are too bright, so we can turn these down and maybe to something like 2. Okay, and are these, it still looks quite bright there, which I think is nice. Okay, I think that's a nice effect. You can also then adjust these if you wanted to, so maybe I'll actually turn these on and have a play with maybe pointing this towards the kitchen. Yeah, I think that's cool. Okay, so I think that is kind of the main room set out. So now we can add a little bit more accessories going around the room, and we can then try to make the room feel like it's actually being lived in. So one thing we could start adding over here is maybe a plant on the side here on the kitchen, maybe a stool, maybe some magazines and stuff like this, because this still looks like nobody actually lives here. They've only moved in their main furniture. So there are some things we can do. As this is a glass cabinet, what we could actually do is add some glass shelves in here. And also this glass is actually still using the old glass method, so I might actually detach that and make this glass a bit more see-through. And yeah, so we'll work on that one now. Right, so I'm probably just going to do a time lapse of this section of me adding accessories and stuff like this, just because it'll make things go a little bit quicker, because it's just going to be me finding models and filling in the space. But first thing I'm just going to do is just separate this this glass and make sure that I've got it set to over here and only visible to transmission and glass. And let's just make a, I don't know if you need to do this, but I think this new shader does do a better job. So let's just make sure we do this. And then we have some nice glass. So I'm actually just going to separate these and set these to visibility by wire, so we can actually see inside the object. And then I'm going to start adding some things in here. So yeah, I guess I'll do a time lapse of me adding some things now. Okay, now, and before I forget, I am actually going to add a skirting board. So as I said at the beginning, you can shift D and then convert this one to a curve, and then we have a curve edge. So let me actually just bring this one into, right, so now we have this. I'm just going to delete this segment, and then I'm just going to add a skirting profile. So how this works I can show you, but I've just made some, so I'll just add any skirting. This one will do fine. And then what I want to do is just find one which I like. None of them really, but I think this one will be fine. So I want to get this curve, and then I'm going to click on this and do Control J. But I do want to turn around, I think it's this one here. Nope. I'm just going to flip it around. There we go. And then the other ones I can delete, and then we just move this one down. Actually, just delete this one and then move this one down. So then we have a really quick skirting board, and I think it's actually just got a basic wood material. Okay, let's bring this down. This is not in the actual object anymore, so this is easy to fix. Let's just select this profile and then go into edit mode and just do G and then X, and then that brings it in. Just bring it in like so, and then we can see, I think it's actually just got a white material. Oh, and it's really big, so let's just make it smaller as well. You just need to scale this to how you want it to be. Something like that I think is fine. And is it white? Okay, it is white, so let's just make this white as well so it doesn't confuse us in the viewport. And let's see how this is looking. Okay, this plant is too close to the wall, I think, so let's just move this a bit further away. And I guess there's another thing we could actually do, and then that'll be the final thing, is actually just adding a tree over here. Oh, and also something up here. So what's going on over here? So let's just have a look. So, okay, so we've got, as you can see, I made the glass a bit lighter so it's a bit easier to see inside. So I might actually add a couple more things here, and then I might add something in the top shelf there, and then also, okay, this is turning out okay here. And I might move this further away from the wall, and then, yeah, so then what I'm going to do is add some trees to the background here, so there's something going on that's quite close to the curtain. And then I'm going to work on the render settings. Okay, so now we want to get onto the render passes. And the render passes basically add in some extra information into the compositor. So click on compositor, and then what we can do is then add some more information here. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn on denoising data. And what that does is if I add a denoise pass here, and I can click this one to here and this one here, and albedo into the albedo. And what that will do is denoise the image in as high quality as possible. Then we have a few things here which are quite helpful in the compositor. So if I turn on object index and material index, what it does is creates two more outputs here which you can then use to add certain objects into this index. So if I click on this floor here, let me turn this on, and then we go over to the object information, we can then set the pass index. So if I just do, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, then if I go to add an ID mask, and index was 1, 2, 3, and then what we can do is click the object index, because this is under object data, and then that, when I do a render, will create a mask just for that object. And then I can do the same thing for example, the walls. So I click on the wall, and then I can go and give it an object pass of maybe 258. It's basically any random number. You just make sure you don't want it to be the same as another number. So you can do number 1, but then make sure another object doesn't have the same index as you. So whatever, just do 456. And that will be 456. And then we could do the same thing for the actual material information as well. So if I click on this yucca plant, it's all one object, but let's say I just want to do a mask on these green leaves. I can go over to here and click on the material that I want. Scroll down, and under settings, you can see there's a pass index of 1. Let's just do 11. And then I can do another material index, set this to 11, and then put the material index into here. I'm also going to enable anti-aliasing, otherwise we get some jagged edges. And then I think I might do another material index for this plant over here. So this one, okay, so I've already set this up to 2. So let's do object material index as 2. And there is another method as well, as adding some masks to your objects so that you can do some compositing a little bit later as well. And that is these ones here. If you enable all of them, I'm then going to enable these passes here, this one, and this one, and this one. You can go through these, and I recommend that see what all of them do. You see if you can use any of them in your own post-production workflow. If you don't need any, then just don't enable them. But I'm going to do a quick render now to show you what each of these passes do, and then you can then decide which one is for you. But there are some which I will definitely be using in the end, and there are some which are definitely nice to have just in case you need to. So I'm just going to do a quick render and we'll see what happens. Okay, so I just did a really quick render here, and then we can see over, if I go to here, and I can then just plug in these and see what all of them do. Oh, let's plug this one into here and try a few other ones into here. So you can see how this has created masks for certain objects, and this will be for the grass. And then you're able to use these in the compositing a little bit later. Okay, and what does the other ones look like? So this is the diffuse direct, this is the diffuse indirect, and then this one is the diffuse color itself. So this is as if it's just the color and nothing else. And then if we go to glossy direct, and then we can also go to glossy indirect. I think the glossy direct will actually be quite helpful for showing off the highlight, and especially in the glass, because Blender glass always looks a little bit flat, but then this should be able to make it pop and also show off a few extra reflections. I think this one is going to be the most used one. I don't know if there'll be anything displayed in these transmission ones. Okay, so that is so that's actually just showing the glass and then what's behind it. So that can also be quite helpful sometimes. And then we have the crypto matte. So if we go and add a crypto matte node here, and then if we plug in the image into here, I believe this other information that's created for the crypto matte, I think that's for the old method. So if I go to crypto matte legacy, what the idea is that you're going to plug in the image into here, as well as, for example, object index 1, 2, and 3. But we don't need this one now. I believe it can just be done with this one node. And if you plug this one into here, you won't see anything. If you plug in matte, you also won't see anything. But if you plug in pick, you can then see, this is all of the, I believe, the object information. So if I go to, and you can also go to material information and also assets and the objects. If you do want to have more colors, then what you need to do is when you go to the render here, you can set more levels. And then what we want to do, if I want to just highlight certain objects, I can then go over to click on add and click on this object here, and then you will then create a path just for that image. And if I go back to this one, you will then just see a cutout of just that object, and then the rest will be transparent. But there is actually no denoising on this one, so if I plug in the image into here, then we'll get the denoised version of the crypto matte. But mostly it's just useful for creating some sort of masks. So I can then also, if I go back to pick, I can then pick other objects as well, and then we can create certain masks for certain objects. Okay, so that is quite helpful. Of course you can use the ID mask, which I think is quite helpful when you set up the scene initially anyway, and then these masks are just black and white, there's no other information, and these just work as out of the box. The crypto matte is a little bit more involved, but you can see how powerful it can be and how quick it can be to add certain objects to the scene. But I think I'm just going to leave this one off for now, and then just work with just these masks, because I don't want to end up with a million other passes. So I'm just going to leave this one off like this. Okay, so I think that's probably enough for now. I'm just going to disable these, otherwise I'm going to end up with a ton of different outputs here, but I don't necessarily need them. Okay, another render pass that is super useful in architectural visualization, and that is light passes. And light passes in Blender is something which is, well, basically not so possible. You can technically add new render layers, so you can go onto here and you can click on render layer and call this one render no lights, for example, and then you can go and you can go to the scene. Let's go back and click on all of the lights. Let's actually just hide everything else from the scene, and then we can select all of the lights and move them to their own layer. Move to new selection and call this one lights. Okay, and then with this no light selected, we can turn this off, and then what that will do is it will do two renders now. So it'll do one render which is the view layer, and then it'll do another render which is the no lights. So then you get two different renders, and that is super helpful in the post-production. But the problem is in Blender it requires two different renders, which can take, you know, if one render takes an hour, it'll be a shame to then have to render for another hour to get another render without any lights. So in this case I'll just get the environment lights. So that's not super helpful. I'm not going to go into that in any more detail because I think that deserves a tutorial on its own. But for now, I'm just going to do it like this, and then I might just do another render afterwards myself, you know, because you can still do it manually just by turning it off and then hitting render again. But if you do have e-cycles, I recommend that you do set up, you do click on sync light groups. Make sure you click on denoise all passes, because then this can actually do what I was just saying. So you can then adjust the lighting afterwards. then the idea would be that you can get each of these render passes and save these out as separate layers, and then you can composite them later into Photoshop to maybe adjust some lights if you need to. If you find out when you get to the post-production stage that these are way too bright, you then have the ability to darken them a little bit. But I'm not going to go into this tutorial in eCycles, but please check out other videos of mine to see how that works. But for now, I think that that's actually fine. So we have these basic render passes, and now I'm just going to create a file output. So what I want to do is create a file output node. You want all of these render passes to be saved somewhere. So what I'm going to do is create one which will be image denoised, and I'm going to plug this one into here. And then going to create another one here, image raw, and then that will just be just with the standard image without it being denoised, because maybe the denoiser has ruined certain areas, and then that allows you to then adjust it later on. And then we're going to add a few more, which will just be for the IDs. So this one, I believe, which one was this one? Was that the floor? I think it was. Yep, so this one I'll call floor, walls, and I believe this one was the yucca leaves, and then this one was the grass. So I think that was that one. I have to click on this one, go just to double check. Okay, and it's ideal, of course, that when you're setting up these render layers and indexes to actually create this output while you're doing it. Okay, I'm just gonna make these a bit smaller. Okay, the next thing we have is going to be the diffuse direct, diffuse indirect, and diffuse color. I'm not sure if I'm even going to use these, but I thought I might as well, just in case. And I think the most useful one here is going to be the diffuse color. Because if one color starts to look quite washed out, you then have the ability to then adjust that. So I'm then going to add two more. I'm not going to add in the transmission direction and transmission indirect, but just the glossy direct and the glossy indirect. And the glossy indirect. Okay, I think that should be fine for now. Of course, you can go through and add some more if you need to, but this is what I'm just going to do. And as for the output, I'm going to set it to TIFF and 16-bit. That is probably the highest image size that you need, and this contains the majority of the data which is going to be held in the image. If that's going to take up too much space for you, try out PNG. If that's too much space, then I would go to a JPEG, but a JPEG is the one with the least amount of information held in the image. And that is useful if there's certain areas which are completely blown out and white. If you have a TIFF, there's a good chance that you'll then be able to bring the color of bring the brightness right down and then actually start to see some information again. Whereas if this is a blown out white area as a JPEG, then that's completely lost, and then you can't really fix that. Okay, so now I'm going to hit render, and then I'm going to save these outputs into this folder here. I've already done some tests, but we can delete these. So I'll just select this output folder and then hit render, and then we can see what happens. Okay, and I actually just forgot to say, but as for the actual render settings, you can render on CPU or GPU. I'd recommend that you also go to preferences and make sure that you're using the correct renderer for your actual device. It will vary depending on if you have an RTX card or not. But I'm just going to leave it rendering CPU for now, and I'm going to set the passes to 250 because we are using a denoiser. If you find that the denoiser is doing too much to the image, then do increase the samples. You don't want really the denoiser to be doing too much work, because then it will start filling in the blanks where it thinks there should be detail and there isn't. Of course, if you have the time, you should render it in as many samples as possible just to get the real pure image. But in this case, I found that 250 actually worked fine for the purposes of this tutorial. As for light bounces, I've got it set to this because that is probably the highest amount you probably need. That means that it's going to be lots of light bounces, and it is going to take longer, but I have the time to wait, so that's fine by me. As for light clamping, I've set this really high because that basically means that the higher the value, the less of an effect it has. Unless you set it to 0, then it's turned off. I think if you're getting lots of fireflies and stuff, then it is better to set this to something quite low, like 10 or even lower if you really need to, but that in this case 80 seemed fine. I've actually also got under pixel filter, I've got it set to Blackman Harris and 1.15 because that makes the edges feel a bit sharper, and I thought that looks nicer to me, but that's also kind of up to your preference. I think it's default 1.5, and I think that's kind of it for the main render settings. There's not really anything else. If you want to know how to render in the best settings, then I recommend you just check out a tutorial, but that's kind of everything that I have here. Okay, so the first render has actually finished, and because I actually created a second render layer as an example to show you how to create a render layer without the lights, that render is now actually rendering because it does it automatically. But that's also quite helpful because I do actually want this render pass for the post-production. I think I might need it in a certain case, but we'll see. So I'm just going to leave this to render, and then it's probably going to save it out as a second output, and I'll come back to you when this one has now finished. Okay, so this is now the finished render, and I have done this part about 4 or 5 times because I can't decide if I want to make this more complicated or more simple, and I already know that this tutorial might be touching about 2 hours at the end. So I'm tempted to do a more in-depth part about this section, maybe in another video, if enough people want a more in-depth post-production section. Because ideally, when I did this render, I accidentally, as you know, did a separate render pass which is just for this ambient light, and I think that looks really nice. And when I end up doing this, bring this one in, I think that it looks really nice, and I would love to have a mix between them both. And in other renderers, it does automatically render you each light out independently, but in Blender you have to do separate render layers, do separate renders. You could use eCycles, and that already does a similar thing for you, so you can save out each light. And as an example of how that would work in Photoshop is you can drop in one of these lights like this, and then you can set this to screen, and then you can adjust the lighting in Photoshop afterwards. So you could start off with a base ambient light and then slowly, gradually add in each light in Photoshop to see how you think that the final image should look. I got to that point and I was thinking this is starting to get quite complex, and I think that all I'm going to do for now is just going to show you how a few different render passes can work to help fix your image. But the final image is still going to be nice, but it's not going to be maybe how I would prefer it to be. And I've just noticed that there is some error here, so that we might as well fix that one now. So let's start with fixing errors. So in Blender, so in Photoshop and in Affinity, there is some tools which you can use to fix certain areas. In this case, I'm just going to use the stamp tool, and if you add this one here, make sure it's on current and below, and then you do Alt and click, and then when you paint, it will then paint over a stamped area, but that is the wrong color. So let's just try this bit here, and we can just try to remove this board here. Let's try again, this one like this. Okay, and that should be fine. So before it had the skirting poking through, but now the skirting is no longer going through the curtain. Okay, so now let's jump on to the render passes. So first thing I'm going to drop on is the gloss direct, because I think it looks really nice. So Blender glass really sucks because it loses a lot of highlights, and this gloss direct also has highlights for multiple other objects. So how would I add over this onto my image that I've already created? Because it's mostly a black and white image, it does give you a clue into thinking that you can use a certain mode, and that would be screen. And what that does is it makes the white areas shine through, but all the black areas they don't, or all the darker areas. So you can see here, if I add this on, it adds a really nice highlight from this light behind here, which makes it feel like it's in a lighting studio, which feels quite correct. And also this glass just looks so much nicer having this nice glare coming off it like that. So if I turn that one off, turn it on, it just looks so much better. This makes Blender glass almost look nice. So let's keep that one on. It also affects the tap and everything, but there are certain areas which I don't think it should be. So previously you couldn't quite see that this was a area light, but if you turn this one on, you can see it. So we need to turn it off somehow. So let's click on the mask and do B and then B and then X, and we switch between white and black. So this has created a white mask, and we want to paint it out using the black. So there you go, it has gone. and you can press Shift and click on this to try turn this one on and off. And I realize that I've also lost some in the grass, which does look quite nice. So what I'm going to do is press X to bring back the white and paint this back here. Okay, if you do want to know, in Photoshop, if you hold down Control and Alt, you can then press the right mouse button and go right to make it big, go left to make it small, go up to make it soft, and go down to make it hard. So in this case, I want it to be relatively big and soft. Anyway, so that is nice. I think it's added some nice glare. There are some other passes which I'm not going to use in this case, but they do have a use case in certain times. So for example, diffuse color is helpful for bringing back certain colors if they're lost in the render. It's also really helpful, for example, if you have a completely overblown area from this sunlight, you can bring back the color and bring back some detail. Maybe I'll show you that one in a second. Let's just bring that down. Okay, now I want to show you how to use these masks. So you could drop in this mask here. You can also drop it into channels because it is a black and white mask. But just for now, I'm just going to drop it into here. I'm going to press Control, click on left mouse button and do Control C to copy that mask. Now I can just turn that one off and I'm just going to move it down to the bottom. And over here with that mask copied, I go Levels, add a Levels, and then Alt click into the mask and then paste this mask here. And you can see I've basically just copied this one here, into this mask here. And what that allows us to do is adjust this brightness from this floor independently from everything else. So that is using that mask ID, if you can remember. So that one I can just bring down. I'm also already wondering if this is way too complicated because this is a Blender tutorial, but never mind. Okay, and I really would love to fix this because I really don't like how this light is coming from here, this shadow, sorry, when the majority of the light should be coming in from here, but never mind. That could be fixed in maybe another post-production tutorial. So for now, I think that is fine. We can also do the similar thing for the yucca plant. For example, if you think that it's too dark, you can do Control C, sorry, Control click. Let's just turn this one off, move it down and add another Levels and do Alt click and do Control V. Right then, so now we have this mask created for this, so then we can just make this a bit brighter if we wanted to. But I also think that maybe there is too much color, so I can go under here, Hue and Saturation, and click Alt, hover over the in-between bit, and then that makes it so that these two are connected. So if I turn this one off, this one also turns off, but we can then remove the contrast, remove the saturation, or we could also change the color of the green, and I think that fits maybe a little bit nicer. I think I might actually show you a use case for this now. So if I make this floor and add another, press B and then do this. So let's say you've done a render, the light coming from outside has completely blown out this part of the floor and you can no longer see the floor. That would really suck. So what you can do is use this diffuse color pass. So if I bring this over the top, turn this one on, and also if I do Alt, click and drag this mask onto here, so I'm only affecting the floor. And then what I can do is set this one to, for example, multiply. And you can then start to see how you can fix if there's complete detail lost. You can start bringing some things back, but in this case that is completely unnecessary, so I'm just going to leave that one off. Okay, so I think that's probably fine. That gives you a brief overview of how to use certain render passes. Right, so let's finish this one off. So if I do Control, Alt, Shift, and E, it makes a brand new layer. And if you go like this and do Convert to Smart Object, you can then adjust this and add a filter, Camera Raw filter. Now, I believe you can do this in Affinity Photo, but in Photoshop, this section, if you click OK, you can adjust it later. Whereas in Affinity, I believe that it's set in stone and you can't then change it once it's done. I can't remember the name of it. It's like photo something. So anyway, for now, let's just work on this. What I like about this is that you can just work all the way down and adjust your image as it goes down. So we can adjust the temperature. So if it is too warm, and I think that it is a little bit too warm, so you can just bring this down just a little bit. Really don't go too much. Let's just to take the edge off of certain areas. And I don't know if I want to adjust this. No, let's just leave this one like this. I can make it a little bit brighter. So try to find maybe the brightness of how the general whole image should be. And then we can add maybe a little bit of contrast. I'm just going to ignore these ones for now because I'm going to adjust more in the curves than for this section. But we get to this section here, which is for vibrance and saturation. Vibrance is a funny one. So vibrance, if you go all the way to 0, doesn't necessarily mean it's completely black and white, especially for certain images. Okay, and saturation on the other hand, if you go all the way down to the bottom, it is definitely going to be all black and white. Vibrance, I believe, takes down the saturation for certain colors more than others. It has a different color wheel, I believe. It's kind of like a more softer saturation, and I think it affects more skin tones than anything else. So if I turn this one down just a little bit, it will turn down more of the skin tones. And I think that this image in general is too pinkish and too much of this kind of color. So if I bring this one down, I believe it will fix that just a little bit. And that is what I love to do in my images. I hate it when there are too many colors which are too bright. You know, you might have a chair here which is bright blue, a bright orange sofa, I don't know, some plants which are bright green, and generally those images just look bad because they don't look like they have their colors managed. So I do generally just like to just take off a little bit of the edge with vibrance or saturation, just to reduce the saturation a little bit more, because I think that it does look nicer. It looks softer and easier to look at. So let's go to curves, and I really like curves. What I like about this section here is it allows you to adjust it more easily without actually having to know how curves work. And a good thing to have in general is what they always say is like a little bit of an S curve. So if I bring up the highlights a little bit, just a little bit like here, and then I can then bring down maybe some shadows and then bring down the blacks and something like this. So if I turn that one off, turn it on, you can see that it adds a bit more contrast to the scene. I don't want to add too much highlights so certain areas get completely blown out, but I can then turn that down. Did I actually? Oh, okay, so there is another area which I actually wanted to adjust for this section. So the highlights which I created actually created a really horrible look to these curtains. So I'll fix that in a bit, but let's just continue as I'm working. So detail is a really nice one. You want to use this very subtly, but what you want to do is just add sharpening. So sharpening just makes the edges look really crisp. Sometimes I see some images and they look like this and it's just like, ugh, my eyes. So you just want to just use it, I don't know, even 20 to 30, just add a little bit more sharpening to the image. It's like something like this. So if I turn that one on and off, you can see it just brings a bit more detail and it feels like it's more, I don't know, tangible. You can feel it a bit better. So let's just go like this. Okay. And color mixer is one of the most powerful things in this. I love this section. So what it allows you to do is adjust the hue, saturation, vibrance of each individual color. So if I bring up the greens, well, it's a bit hard to see actually, but you can see the greens being affected. So down here it's completely black and white. If you bring it to there, it's to full. Let me try one that's a bit easier to see. So here, if I bring the yellows to full, the yellows are brighter. If I bring the yellows down, there are no more yellows in this scene. So if you find that your scene is maybe too magenta or something, you can use this to bring down those areas. But there's not really much in my scene anyway. But I really like just taking, let me try this orange. Yeah, maybe just take these both down just a little bit. And maybe the greens can be a little bit more because it is a bit hard to see. Okay, and then you can also adjust the hue. So if you think that the oranges should be more pinks, then you can, and you can adjust it like this. But I think something like this. Luminance, you can make the greens brighter, which I also think looks quite nice. So if I bring this one up, it adds a nice little highlight onto these leaves, which look nice. Okay. I do think actually that there might be too much. The black's a bit too strong here, so let's just bring this up like this. Okay, that's looking better. Right then, so now let's go to, there are different things you can do here. So vignette, so a vignette is nice, but don't go too strong. I like to just add just a little bit on here. Distortion, if you're using a fisheye or if something is completely broken, but in generally in 3D, this is not really needed as much. And geometry, if your camera is not completely straight, you can click these buttons here, but because my camera is already straight, all the lines already match. And there are, you know, you can keep going. So there's another vignette here, but there's also grain. So grain is nice. If you've ever taken a photograph, if you zoom into the photo, especially like a professional DSLR, which doesn't do denoising like a mobile phone, there is always going to be a little bit of grain on the photo. Now, you don't want to go too strong. I do see some images where they go completely crazy, but let's just add just a little bit onto it. So it's just really subtle, but it just makes it feel like there's a bit more feeling to it. And I'm probably going to leave that at that. There is also some profiles, so you can quickly adjust the look of the image. I mean, that one looks quite nice actually. But I think it might add this on, but it's a little bit lightly. So let's turn this up and press OK. Boom. So that is now the image. If I turn this one on and off, you can then see how flat this is compared to how exciting this is. Right. So what I said earlier is that this curtain is a bit incorrect. So I'm going to turn this one off for now, and then I'm going to adjust this pass here because I don't think that should be on the curtain. So let's just press B. Go to here. Oh, if you don't have your brush visible, just press caps lock. And then I just want to paint over here to remove this extra bit of highlight. And I think that's better. So you can still see the highlight on certain objects, but not that bit. And then with that created, I can then do the same thing again, Control, Shift, Alt, and E. And then I can just convert this to a smart object and then copy this to this, because that's already got the adjustments on it. And now do Alt, hold down Alt and click and drag, and then you drag that one onto there. Right then, so you can see how I've just done that. So yeah, I think I'm just gonna leave this here. Oh no, wait, stop. I want to do one more thing, and that is the glare. So Blender does have glare, that is true, but I think that the glare, but the glare node, I think, is a pile of crap. There is a physical shader in eCycles. I'm not sure if it's like going to be coming in a later version of Blender, but I don't think it's actually in here. No, it's just the standard glare. So if you want some nicer glare, I recommend you check out eCycles for now. But in general, the glare is just, you just have to really play with it until you can get something which you think looks nice. And there is just a way easier way to make nice glare. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a glare image. Okay, so what I've just done is just find an image like this online. I believe you could just search for lens flares or camera lens glares or something like this, and just try to find an image which is like this. And then what you can do is set this to screen, and you just move this over to here, and there we go. We have a perfect light glare coming off of here. If it's too bright, you can bring it, make it a bit dimmer, and then you can also, let's just make it a little bit smaller. So let's just bring this like this, and okay, let's make this a bit brighter actually. And then all we need to do is just copy it and do Control T and bring these over here. To here. And then of course, if you wanted to, you can also add it onto certain objects. So you can add one like onto this glass, maybe like here, and do Control Alt click and then drag this one down to make it a bit smaller. Oh, whatever. Okay, and one last thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to I think disable this floor here. Let's disable this one here, because I think the floor came out a little bit too dark. Let's do over the top of everything, including the game. Control Alt Shift and do Convert Smart Object, and then let's again copy this one to here. Okay, I think that's a bit nicer. So previously the floor was a bit too dark, but I think that is also quite nice, and I have missed off a glare there. Anyway, yeah, I think that's probably fine for now. This has gone on for quite some time, and trying to do a full from start to finish tutorial is quite hard within 2 hours, so I hope that you understand. And yeah, if there are any particular areas which you want me to go in more depth, whether it's unwrapping, post-production, lighting render passes, so you can do individual light passes or anything like that, then do let me know and I'll try to do it. If you're if you've watched this long, you do know that we're from iMeshh, so if you want to be able to follow this along completely, please check out iMeshh. It's $99 for a ridiculous amount of assets. I think it equals about 9 cents per model or something if you download each thing. So yeah, I really recommend you check that out, and it also supports us and allows us to do more of these videos, which we hope to do a lot more of. I've got a couple of more ideas for some things coming up. So yeah, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and have a nice day and have a nice week.